Student Support Services with Mariella, and we are excited to have you here for the first installment of our School Mental Health webinar series, and we're kicking it off with Traumas in the Schools Part 1. This will be recorded and housed on our School Mental Health webpage, and we'll put that in the chat here in a little bit. But we will have a short survey at the end, just via Zoom post. We just ask if you take a minute to fill that out just to give us some feedback on today's training. So we will go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Susan Lindblad and Sarah Shanahan, who are going to lead our training today.
Good morning, or good afternoon, whatever time of day it is, sorry, lost track. My name is Sarah Shanahan, and I'll let Susan introduce herself.
Hi, go ahead.
Oh, good.
I'm Susan Lindblad. I'm one of the school psychologists at Hastings Public Schools and the director of the AWARE grant project here at Hastings. And so this is the start of, I think, our 4th year. We'll be starting our 4th year at the end of the month.
Yeah, and I work at Heartland Counseling Services in South Sioux City, Nebraska. I work with the South Sioux City School District for the AWARE grant as well. I'm the community project leader there, so I help coordinate the grant as well. And we are going into year 4, so we've implemented trauma sensitive schools for over a year now, and started implementing this within the school setting. So we've had a bit of experience, not extensive, but learned quite a bit along the road. So we'll get started here. Okay, so this is going to be supported by the Project AWARE. That's with the Nebraska Department of Education and the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services, and it is a SAMHSA grant. So the goals of this training is we want to learn what is trauma and what are the types of trauma. And then also how that trauma is going to impact students' mental health and their learning within the classroom setting, and how to interact with them differently. So some things that we already can kind of start with knowing is we know kids have tough times and have tough things going on in their life. They can have behaviors in the classroom and can be going through a lot of stuff that we don't necessarily always know about. And what happens at home is going to impact what happens at school because they are a holistic person and we don't get to just have the parts of their brain to educate them. From this training, we're not going to be trained therapists, and all of us are going to have a different understanding of trauma-informed care, especially in the classroom. So it's just about developing our toolkit, so that way then we can be a little bit more informed, have a different view on it, to be able to have expand our perspective. And there's room for everyone around the table. So no matter what your role in the building is, it's impactful because any relationship around a kid can have an impact on them positively. So we're going to watch this video here to just kind of start off with. So from that video, kind of what we want to reflect on is, if we knew what someone was going through, would it change the way we wanted to interact with them? And that includes the staff that we work with in a building, because as you see in that video, it's not just the kids that have stuff going on, it's us. We have stuff going on that impacts us and impacts our mood and how we react to things. So it's also a good reminder from this video to give yourself a little bit of grace, because it's not about being perfect, because you're going through things too. It's just about kind of putting us in that mindset of empathy, to kind of understand what other people are going through, that we might not see on the outside. So some reasons why trauma-informed care and being trauma sensitive is important is because half of mental health disorders begin by the age 14. So if you think back, I have an anxiety disorder, and I know when it first started, it was one of the scariest things because I didn't understand it. And no one really described it to me or told me how to deal with it. So when you first get it, it can be some of the scariest times for you. So that's important to kind of take in account. And when you look at kids, they're going to be in your classroom a lot. So they're there over 30 hours. And if you think of an elementary school teacher and the impact that they can have on a student, if they have 20 kids a year for 40 years, that's 800 students that can be impacted. And if you look at the same, a high school teacher can have over 4,000 students that they're impacting. So being able to see this can have a really big impact. And if we don't address mental health, some serious things can happen. Not only does the education part of it really get impacted, like things like missing school more likely to drop out of school, but we also have the huge impact of suicide is the second leading cause of death with young people. So we really have to take that into account. And then when you look at it from a student perspective, a financial perspective, and an educator perspective, if you look at a student, they are going to have higher academic achievement, less absenteeism, and they're going to graduate more. So you can either put your money in the playpen or the state pen, basically, is what Susan had told me, and it really stuck with me when she said that. So either invest with them early or you're going to invest with them later on. And then with educators, the more positive interactions you have with students, the more likely you are to have personal well-being and have less stress in your own work life. So, and we're going to go over what ACEs are later, but 80% of kids who are struggling academically have 3+ ACEs, which is not a hard score to get to for a lot of these things. So we just have to take into account that these are common and they do impact learning in the classroom. So then we get to types of stress. So not all stress is the worst thing in the world for you. Some things are really positive stress. I got married this year, so that's a really positive stress for me. It was new and it was exciting and it was a great thing, but it was also really stressful. So I can't deny that that was a stress on my life. Then you get into tolerable death. So think of the death of maybe a grandma on that child. So maybe it wasn't, they were able to get through it, but they were able to get through it because they have people that care about them kind of supporting and buffering around that. And then you get to toxic stress. So this is going to be ongoing. It's going to be repeat exposure to abuse or neglect. And these are going to be things that it's like piled on one after another. And it impacts you and your ability to be able to bounce back from that. So also the way you can think of toxic stress is that you start getting stuck in that survival mode, or the animalistic part of the brain, as I like to think about it, because I'm not super savvy with brain science. So that's how I can understand it, is knowing that it's that back part of our brain that if we didn't have that frontal part of our brain, that prefrontal cortex, we would be these like animals, just like them. And then I'm going to turn it over to Susan here, or one more. So then you get to what toxic stress is. So it's impeding the brain's ability to grow and develop. It's having a lot of cortisol, or what is also known as the stress hormone. And you can have that fight, flight, freeze, or submit response. So you are getting stuck in survival mode and you're not able to bounce back out of it as quickly because it's constant and it's going to constantly be there. So you're having an overstimulated limbic system, which activates fear And then it's going to produce anxiety, hyperarousal. So you're going to jump whenever the door slams or different things like that. And you're going to be really vigilant. So I will turn it over to Susan for this next portion.
Okay, so we're going to get into looking at different types of trauma, and I'm looking at everyone on here. We are talking to the choir, you know, preaching to the choir. I think everyone on here has a fairly good understanding of trauma. And when we talk to our staff members and our teachers, I'm always thinking they probably know, but sometimes you have to hear things 6, 7, 8 times to let it really settle in and become truth in life. And so just the more we can let our teachers and case managers really know what is trauma and how does it impact students, then they can start to make that more positive difference in their students' lives. But trauma is either one event or a series of events or a set of circumstances that can either be really happening or just perceived as an individual. So I always think of, you know, we think of a traumatic event, maybe a car accident where people are hurt. And I might think we're going to have another car accident because mom or dad slammed on the brakes. So it didn't really happen, but I perceived it. So I might be into that trauma event again. So it's real or perceived, and it just really overwhelms our ability to cope. So our internal resources are maxed out, our external resources are maxed out. And next slide. Okay, I wanted to read a short excerpt from a book, and it's by Rawson and Hull. They're editors of a book called Supporting and Educating Traumatized Students from Oxford University Press. I just thought it was such a powerful overview of trauma. And it says trauma is far-reaching and impacting more than 20% of the population. Childhood trauma has the potential to rob the health of all those it touches, impacting nutrition, brain development, emotional well-being, risk for other illnesses, and even longevity. Childhood trauma is complex and can express itself in many ways. In some individuals, the influence is very subtle, nearly invisible, while in others, its effects may be powerful and readily apparent. Some people may resist the impact of childhood trauma naturally, and others are very vulnerable. Importantly, the impact of childhood trauma is also influenced by the environment. With timely and effective intervention, the influence of trauma may be minimized and even healed. In the absence of care, however, the negative effects can build up and worsen over time, leading to illness, financial costs, and eventually the risk of serious disability or even death. It's hard to imagine a psychosocial factor more relevant to the educational world than trauma. The numbers of children and teens who have or will experience significant adversity are staggering, and the implications of this adversity are immense. It's rare to have a classroom that will not contain at least one student who has experienced significant stress. In communities more touched by poverty, violence, homelessness, racism, and other layers of social vulnerability, it's conceivable that the majority of students in a school will have experienced significant stress. And trauma does not discriminate. It touches the lives of children who might otherwise have had no difficulties, and it touches the lives of children who simultaneously struggle with learning problems and developmental challenges. It touches children in communities that have ready access to resources, and it touches communities who struggle with limited funds. Building the educational systems that are able to sensitively and effectively address the needs of those who have been exposed must be a task of the whole community. School engagement, experiences, and success are among the most predictive variables of healthy adult outcomes and of resilience. An investment in healthy schools is an investment in our future. So I just thought trauma, just that view of it doesn't discriminate. It can be anywhere at any time. And I seriously doubt I could walk into any classroom and not find one student or one staff member who has experienced something significant like that in their life. Okay, and I wanted to throw this slide in because that last slide kind of talked about trauma environmentally and kind of nationally. It's there. This one looks at schools. And when I saw this picture, I was first overwhelmed with just the number of students in that one classroom. And I have rarely walked into a classroom that is that crowded, but it's a good reminder that we are packing students into these small spaces and then having these high learning expectations when not everyone is there. We can see the one youth in the middle, head covered by his hand. It's like, he is shut down for some reason. We really don't know why. But schools are not always safe haven for youth. In 2007, 2008, a survey was done and they found 75% of public schools reported at least one violent crime that year. And that rate climbed to 94% when only talking about middle school and high schools. So 94% youth 12 to 18 are actually more likely to experience a violent crime in the school setting than outside of it. So trauma's in our communities, trauma's in our schools. And that next slide, Sarah, really shows how trauma is in my own district. This slide is a picture of our BIMAS results from the spring of 2021, so just last spring. We gave the Behavior Intervention Monitoring Assessment System, the BIMAS. It's a 34-question self-report measure for students grades 8 through 12 that we gave. And how often in the past week did I have thoughts of hurting myself was one of the questions. Thankfully, we had over 65% say rarely, but we had 22% say sometimes, and roughly 12% each say frequently or very frequently in the last week, I have thought of hurting myself. And just the reality of that being my students in my building just kind of really got to me. And I was like, are we reaching these students? Are we meeting with each one? Are we developing safety plans with each one? Are we connecting them with resources? Are we talking to safe family members? So just the need of community, schools, and my own district. And I think my district is probably similar to the other districts in our state. So the next slide, types of trauma. What I think about trauma, first of all, is an acute trauma, an isolated incident, that car accident, that fire, that physical assault in a dark alley somewhere, just something that happens once and can be overwhelming. But another type of trauma is the chronic trauma. And that's where something can be repeated over time. It can be prolonged, like chronic bullying in the educational environment or in the community. And I see someone put in a comment, not even taking into consideration bullying at school. I think of the LGBTQ community. Yes, that would be like chronic trauma prolonged if someone is bullied for an issue like that. Prolonged family illnesses, domestic violence, all of that can really impact a youth's development. And then you go to complex trauma, which is the ones that when I was working in private practice, I would see more often. When a trauma is happening over a period of time, it is happening to the child from an early age and it is impacting their overall development. So all of those issues of just having acute trauma and complex or chronic trauma piling on top of each other for this one little child and overwhelming their ability to cope. And then one type I don't want to forget about is historical trauma. And I just think about this trauma that occurs, these wounds that occurs across time and across generations, maybe someone's entire lifespan. And we put on a picture of just broken chains, just symbolizing maybe the movement from individuals being slave to being freed, but that freedom did not bring about equality and equity and liberation. So it was this ongoing trauma for generations. And I think we're still working through some of that. It's definitely better than it has been in the past, but I don't know that we're at the finish line of where I want to finish yet. But we don't want to forget about that historical trauma. And even when you're thinking about your families who are in a chronic poverty cycle and not able to break that, that can be a type of historical trauma. And the impact of trauma. Some people seem to experience a traumatic event and kind of like bounce back from it. Others will experience a similar traumatic event and it can totally derail their life. And so that impact of trauma can depend upon your age, your developmental level, your relationship with the victim, your past experiences, if you have adults who are providing that safety or that buffer. And Sarah and I, when we were talking about this earlier, we talked about, one of my administrators talked about, why don't these kids just pull up their bootstraps? That's what I did when I went through this when I was younger. And I was thinking, you know, you're lucky you had boots that had straps. You probably had an adult in your life who was supportive. You probably had some successful experiences with school. You probably had some internal resources that you could draw on. And then there's kids out there who have the boots but no straps. And Sarah was like, well, then there's kids out there with tennis shoes and flip-flops, or kids out there with no boots. So they can't pull up their bootstraps because the impact of trauma is different for each one of us. And then the next slide is just a picture I wanted you to have, and it is in the resources. This was shared, I believe, by Dr. Melissa Sadin, I think I'm saying the name right, where it shows household trauma being in the tree, community trauma being the roots that hold the tree steady, and environmental issues that are out there that could also attack us. So I think of, you know, if I have issues going on in my family, maybe domestic violence, my tree might be weakened, but if I have a strong community, my roots are deep, and I might have someone to provide that support for me. But if I have a little bit of stuff going on in each environment, then I'm more vulnerable and more at risk. So that's a really nice one to share with teachers to explain some of the differences. And I think my last slide of this section is this picture of equality, equity, and liberation. And I think of equality when everyone got the same thing, same education, maybe no matter what. And we came out with special education laws and supports and accommodations and modifications in the 70s. And so as we started to talk about equity, what does each person need in order to participate in life and be successful? And I love that last picture of, why do we have to stop there? Is there a way that we can remove these barriers altogether? And even specifically this barrier of trauma, so that everyone can participate in life and be successful and have that joy. So I love this story.
And then just continuing on. So a lot of times what I hear from teachers when we are presenting this to them is, it's one more thing to do. I have enough on my plate, which is absolutely true. I definitely can't disagree with that. But being trauma informed or trauma sensitive really isn't about doing something additional. It's about reframing or having a different perspective. So as you can see in this image right here, some people might see a vase, but some people might see two vases. It's not that one's wrong, it's just that they're different. And then just another visual. So what do you see here when you look? Do you see the rabbit or do you see the duck?
I saw the duck first.
I see the duck first too. And then on this one, do you see a man running into it or do you see a dog running out? Because the way you view something can also change your emotions towards it. If you see a cute puppy running out of the snow, you're going to have feelings of warmth, cuddles, happy puppy feelings. But if you see a man running in, you're going to think he's robbing something, he's running away, he did something wrong, which are very different emotions. So sometimes our perspective can really cause us to have certain emotions that we wouldn't if we had a different perspective, which can also be the case when you look at, a student who may not necessarily be acting how you always want them to in class. But if you have the perspective of a trauma lens, then you're able to think, wow, they went through so much and they are persevering. They showed up to school today. That's awesome. And then again, do you see a frog or do you see a horse? And these will be shared afterwards so you guys can look at them, because it took me a minute to get them, because again, just like having a trauma-informed lens, it's not something that's going to click automatically in one day. It's things that you have to chip away at and hear again and again in different perspectives to kind of form your own perspective. And again, is it the bottom of a car or is it a night beach? That one was the hardest one for me. So if any of you struggle, I'm there with you.
And one thing that I think is important when we look at perspective, you cannot see both at the same time unless you've trained your brain. It's either I have this perspective or this, and it takes work to jump back and forth. And so I think that's where we want to go with educators. Can I see it in a different way, in a trauma-informed way? And it's just training that brain.
Absolutely. So we're going to watch a video on what ACEs is. So a lot of people are going to be familiar with ACEs, but this is just in case you haven't. This is also just a really great video to share out for a resource. And it has some statistics in there that we can then reference afterwards. So I'll go ahead and play that.
What does your parents' divorce have to do with your risk for heart disease? If your mother had a drinking problem when you were growing up, are you more likely to suffer from depression as an adult? Here's what you should know about ACEs. ACEs stand for Adverse Childhood Experiences, extremely stressful events that can happen to a child growing up. Some experiences are so stressful that they can alter brain development, as well as the immune system, increasing the risk of lifelong health and social problems in adulthood. The term comes from the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, landmark research that shed new light on the root cause of everything from stroke and liver disease to substance abuse and mental illness. In the late 1990s, an epidemiologist from the Centers for Disease Control and a preventive medicine doctor at Kaiser Permanente set out to understand the association between childhood experience and lifelong health. They asked over 17,000 people in the Kaiser Health Plan in San Diego about their health history, as well as difficult questions about their experiences growing up. Anda and Felitti tallied up 10 different kinds of adversity in this largely middle-class and college-educated population. They were stunned to see how common ACEs were. 21% of all respondents were sexually abused as children. 19% grew up with someone who suffered mental illness. 28% had been physically abused. And 2 out of 3 respondents had experienced at least one ACE. The researchers next looked at how someone's ACE score, or the number of adversities they experienced, related to a wide array of serious health and social problems. They saw that the more ACEs someone had, the greater their risk for poor outcomes compared with someone with no ACEs. Someone with an ACE score of 4 had twice the risk of heart disease and cancer. Someone with an ACE score of 5 had an 8 times greater chance of being an alcoholic. And those with an ACE score of 6 or more, on average, died 20 years earlier. With every major problem they looked at in the ACE study, the risk went up for each additional adverse experience in childhood. As Dr. Robert Anda says, what's predictable is preventable. It's important to remember that ACEs are not destiny. ACEs are a tool for understanding the health of a population as a whole. For individuals, an ACE score can be a tool for understanding their own risk for health and social problems, and empower them to make changes for themselves and their children. ACEs tend to get passed down from generation to generation and are common across all income levels, races, and cultures. But increasingly, people of all different professions and backgrounds are coming together to discuss how ACEs affect their communities. They're finding new ways to treat and prevent ACEs. Many doctors are starting to screen their patients for ACEs as part of their medical history. More schools are becoming trauma-informed, considering the source of problem behavior when disciplining their students, instead of immediately suspending or expelling them. To learn more about interrupting the cycle of adversity and improving health and well-being for the next generation, please visit kpjrfilms.co.
Okay, so from that video, it has a lot of information on there. But what we know is ACEs are common. They are things that happen to over 50% of people from what that study showed. And it's things that can happen to anyone. So here's the list that they had on the video. We broke that out just to kind of see, have a little bit longer than a second visual of what the ACEs really entail. And the ACEs study, it has expanded. It is beyond these 10 types for some of them now. But these are the original 10 that people did. So different ones can look at poverty, different historical factors, and different ones like that. But these are going to be the common ones that typically most people are familiar with. So when you look at these, you would probably think the most impactful one is going to be sexual abuse, but it's not. Neglect is the biggest determinant of if you're going to have long-lasting effects or what's going to impact you most negatively later on. And that can be really surprising. And sometimes neglect is one of those things that it's hard to identify, depending on what's going on at home. But if you look at these, divorce is it's very common in the United States, but even just having a divorce in your family could mean that you have an ACE and then you have an increased risk. So as we can see right here, now relating that back to education. So 64% of people in the study, and those are, I should highlight in study, college educated people. Now imagine if you did that in your own building or the own population that you work, it might look a little bit different because not all of them are necessarily college educated and are middle class. So it might be more common for maybe someone who doesn't have as much education or doesn't make as much money. But even that, with the college educated group that they did in the study, having just one ACE, which was 64%, and now relating that to education, you're going to have more absenteeism. You're going to have more likelihood of dropping out of school, lower academic achievement, and then you're going to have more behavioral problems likely than someone who doesn't have an ACE. And then if you have more than 3, which again, that's not that hard to get to that score, and many people have more than 3 ACEs, they are 32 times more likely to struggle in school or fail a class. So it's not about the event, it's about the experience or perception. So this is just another reminder. Keep that in mind, because a lot of times we go into this mindset, well, it wasn't that bad, you didn't experience it yourself, or maybe you just watched your mom getting abused. But it's more about the perception and the experience for them than the actual event of abuse or trauma that may have occurred. So then also, significant relationships are going to be really big buffers. So those are going to be also known as protective factors. So those are going to have a big impact of if they actually impact you in your daily life, because ACEs doesn't necessarily mean trauma and impact in your daily life. But what we also know about ACEs is that they're universal, but not everyone has the same access to being able to work over those ACEs or not have them impact them on a daily basis because they might not have those resiliency factors. Okay, so now we're going to switch over to the brain a little bit. So just to show and reinforce that this is a huge impact, and it's not just that someone comes up with these things. These are true brain changes. So the brain on the left is going to be a healthy brain. The brain on the right is an abused brain. It was this image is from when they did a study with a Romanian orphanage, and for those that weren't held, they were abused. if you just look at the brain on here, so for the brain science, that top part of the brain, that's going to be the prefrontal lobe, and that more advanced part of your brain that makes us what we are as human and be different from different forms of creatures on this planet. And then that bottom one is going to be the brainstem. So as you can see with the abused brain, it's less functioning in that prefrontal cortex, that more advanced part of the brain that makes good decisions, the executive functioning, different things like that. And they're going to be more active in their brainstem, or that animalistic almost part of the brain, that survival part of the brain. So this is something that we have to take into account when we work with kids or anyone with trauma, is that it truly is a brain change for them in that experience that they went through. And then we get to fight, flight, freeze, or submit. It also is called fawn for some, depending if some people want to keep with all Fs. So this is going to be survival mode. So it's that animalistic part of the brain controlling your body, and your body can't help but respond because your body's natural instinct is to protect itself. So that frontal part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, all that good decision-making part of your brain is going to go offline, and it's going to either fight, flight, freeze, or submit. So this video here is about flipping lid. So this is a visual that you can use with youth to help explain kind of what happens with the brain, and it's really effective. We have a student at the South Sioux schools who did a video for us. I wish we had a release to show the video, but they modeled the hand model and explained what that meant to them. So these are concepts that youth can understand and that you can kind of describe it, and you can adjust the language based on their age as well. So if it's maybe too babyish for them, you can use different words too.
It started with a simple but effective idea, a way to visualize our rising emotions and help restore our calm, keeping our cool when flipping our lids. It's a hand model of the brainchild of Dr. Daniel Siegel, and here's how it works. Put your thumb in the middle of your palm and curl your fingers over the top. Now you have a model of the brain. Lift your fingers up and raise your thumb. That's the inner brainstem represented by your palm and wrist. The brainstem controls basic body functions like breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure. Put your thumb back down. That's the approximate location of the limbic area, most notably the amygdala, which helps to regulate emotions and our fight, flight, freeze response. Now, curl your fingers back over the top, and your prefrontal cortex, which allows us to think critically, predict consequences, control impulses, and do other executive functions, is in place. The frontmost part of the brain helps us rationally manage the amygdala and brainstem areas. But when our emotions start to rise, maybe someone's pushed your last button, or you perceive a threat or danger, our amygdala overrides the prefrontal area, and we can flip our lids, losing our cool and acting in ways that can be scary to others. By visualizing our lid flipping and noticing when our emotions are rising, we can take a break or a deep breath and work to calm ourselves, giving our brainstem a chance to regulate our body and allowing us to actually change what the brain does and return to the clearer thinking of the prefrontal cortex. That's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and as a learning tool for our children. It started with a simple but effective idea.
I think that's a great, Sarah, that you had some students modeling that. And I'm just thinking, what a great activity. I could present that to maybe some elementary or even some high school classes about, can you make this so it would be kid friendly, and they could, football players modeling, flipping your lid to elementary students. And I just think they might really like that. But this would be in your handouts. And again, it's just kind of keeping the executive part of the brain and the emotional part of the brain connected and talking. And I think there's all women on here, so I can pick on men. when your spouse is driving and someone cuts in front of you and they like immediately like, oh my God, they're yelling and screaming, hollering out the window, honking the horn and going crazy. I'm like, calm down. Maybe they're late to the hospital. It's just really thinking about what are some different things that could be going other than someone threatening your manhood by cutting in front of you in the car. So just a model or picture that you could show. The next slide is one of my favorites. This is kind of my picture I show teachers for the hippocampus about memory storage. And a healthy brain is here on the left where everything is organized, it's filed neatly. You can go get that little pink shell and wear it to work because you know where that little pink shell is. And the right one is maybe some of our closets at home where things are just kind of messed up and stored somewhere in memory, but we can't get to it. So teachers, if you're teaching someone, single digit arithmetic, 6 times 2 is 12 and 2 times 6 is 12. And we did it together. And then the child was able to do it independently and they went home, they come back to school the next day and they have no idea what you're talking about. It might be because their hippocampus, their memory storage unit is just messed up and we don't know where the file is. So as we can calm down the brain and help them develop filing systems, maybe even teaching will be easier. But think about what your closet looks at home and then think about yourself. Okay, next slide. Good news. The best part about trauma, if there's a best part, positive caring relationships are one of the most effective treatment methods for any child that's gone through trauma. And every adult can be taught how to build a positive connection with their students. One of the things that we like to do at the elementary buildings at Hastings is do the 2x10 intervention. So every staff member is kind of connected with one student and we spend 2 minutes a day with that student for 10 consecutive days. And most staff members at the end of that say, can we keep going? Why, yes, you can keep going. Can I have another student? Why, yes, you can. And so we just keep adding to it. So every child feels connected with an adult. And at the high school, we do more of like a praise train because they're with multiple teachers throughout the day. So it might be every time Sarah walks into the classroom, I want the adult to very artfully welcome her, make eye contact. I'm glad you're here. Touch on the shoulder, something that we're not like freaking her out by like saying, hey, we're glad you're here, Sarah, but we're just being very natural about it to let her know she's valued and important in our building. So relationships. Next slide is think of that first video. What do your students face daily? And I just loved that first video. It's one I marked because I want to show our staff members here at Hastings sometime. But what are they dealing with daily? Or what are even some of your staff members dealing with? Separation, car broke down or stolen, divorce, sick child, just all kinds of stuff. So when we think about what we're facing daily, we want to look at that window of stress. Because stress and trauma impact our ability to tolerate additional stressors. And I'm sure everyone here has had that day on the left where I come to work and I'm feeling good, I'm feeling positive, it's sunny, it's just beautiful and things are going good in my life. So a lot of things can be added to my day before I reach that snapping point. And then we've also had the day on the right where the alarm clock didn't work right. And then I couldn't find my car keys. And then I had to hit the brakes for a cat running across the road and I spilled my coffee all over myself. And then I didn't have on matching shoes. And so one little thing in the classroom and boom, I'm done. So we have to kind of take care of ourselves so that we can have stressors added to us because you can't teach without that. But it takes a regulated brain to work with a dysregulated brain. So if a student is coming dysregulated with that high baseline of stress, we have to be the ones who are coming with a regulated brain with a lower level of stress. And the next slide is just another picture of the same thing with students who come with lots of adverse experiences, may be able to only tolerate a bit before they reach that snapping point, while others can tolerate quite a bit. And that's just a reminder of why we have to be gentle with people and even here, every time a building is going through some sort of trauma or big change or stress, be kind. That's what we're just saying. Be kind with yourself, be kind with others, because we don't know what's going on underneath in someone's life. We just know the tip of that iceberg. And Sarah, was this you or me? Was this you?
I think this one might be me. So I'll go
Perfect.
ahead here. Okay, so we want to look at what is lying beneath that behavior. So it's easy to see like the behavior that you're dealing with because you get agitated. So in the different areas, the different responses, when you are kind of in that survival mode, these can be some responses. So maybe you're withdrawing, maybe you're sleeping in class. That might be a flight, sorry, can't speak. But a fighting could be that aggression. That one's easy to see, but it can also be silliness and being the class clown. And then freeze. So maybe they're the kid that always says, I don't know what to do. Because maybe they are in that kind of mode. Or maybe they are just kind of staring off, or what some people can call dissociating. Or this is a newer one, the fawn or submit. So are they the people pleasers, the ones that kind of are clingy to teachers? They have very few boundaries, and you're going to want to take a different approach with each of these. So the people pleasing ones, it's going to be hard for you to say no, but you also need to be very aware of they have a hard time saying no for themselves. So you might need to set that boundary a little bit earlier, and not ask them to be, the helper every time, because they might struggle with saying no to you. And then just getting in that dysregulation. So the student acts out, the teacher feels disrespected, and then the student engages, then teacher goes, and then it's just a cycle. So where are you at with yourself in this cycle? If a student feels like they're challenging you. So it's just kind of having an awareness of that. And again, it's about being the thermostat, not the thermometer. So the thermostat is going to take that temperature and then adjust. But the thermometer is just going to take the temperature and say it is what it is. So you want to be the one to take a read of it and then change that. And then also, when a child who has trauma, if they're 12 years old, they're going to act half their emotional age, their chronological age emotionally. So what would you expect from a 6-year-old? You would not expect the same thing from a 12-year-old. So it's just taking these into account. So it's not going to be the kids that the traditional discipline works with that you really need to worry about. So trauma informed is about realizing traditional discipline works with the kids who don't need it really the most. So we have to take those different approaches. So again, it impacts academics. So executive functioning, being able to do an assignment, that's what it affects. Engagement and learning. They might have trouble with social cues or reading other kids around them, having verbal cues, having good memory, understanding cause and effect, being able to take someone else's perspective, or differentiate between feeling sad and shame, or maybe angry, and that's why it maybe can come off a little different. And then feeling empathy. So they might really struggle with that. So you might have to engage that a little bit more and kind of prompt that for some of these kids. And then these things in the classroom, they can very easily look like aggression, defiance. So when you look at this, so aggression, that's a fight response. Withdrawal, that's a flight response. So maybe spacing out and staring off, that's going to be that freezing response. And then the kid that's a perfectionist are going to be the fawn or submit response. So it also is going to impact relationships. These kids might really struggle making a connection with a teacher or letting down their guard enough to be able to even create a relationship. So it might really take some work in showing that they can trust you and that they're safe around you. But it's not only the students who are impacted. A study done in 2015 had these statistics. 78% reported they're emotionally and physically exhausted. Imagine if you did that in 2020 or 2021. I would imagine it's going to be super duper high. It's been a stressful bit. But knowing what's bad is important, but also knowing what makes us happy is important. So What is your happiness trigger? What is your coworkers? What is the kids in your classroom? What are their happiness triggers? So knowing that is just as important as knowing what makes us angry or what's wrong. Because we need to do self-care. And this includes doing self-care in multiple different areas of our life. So yes, doing physical, having nutrition, but also having spiritual, having a work-life balance, making those boundaries, financial. We need to fill each of these up, fill that cup up to be able to really work effectively. And then we're just going to watch this for just a second here.
You're not fooling anybody, Bender. The next screw that falls out is gonna be you.
Eat my shorts.
What was that?
Eat my shorts.
You just bought yourself another Saturday, mister.
I'm crushed.
You just bought one more right there.
Well, I'm free the Saturday after that. Beyond that, I'm gonna have to check my calendar.
Good, because it's gonna be filled. We'll keep going. You want another one? Say the word, just say the word. Instead of going to prison, you'll come here. Are you through?
No.
I'm doing society a favor.
So?
That's another one right now.
So that was just kind of, it's pretty funny. And most people are familiar with the Breakfast Club, but it's really looking,
Yeah.
Are you going to be the one who engages with that student and kind of creates that cycle? Or are you going to be the maybe one to give them a little bit of grace in that moment when they're having a hard day, when you're having a hard day, and, you know, not engaging in that cycle with them. So where do you want to be at with that in regards? So just always keeping in mind, give yourself grace, give the kids grace. No one's perfect. And being trauma informed is not about being perfect educator. It's about just taking into account people are human. And what do you want people to consider on your worst day? So I think that's all we have. So if anyone has questions, feel free. I'll stop the share here. This will be shared out, the PowerPoint, so you can get our emails as well if you have any questions about different things. And we will be having a presentation next month in October that will be going more into interventions and strategies to use. If you're kind of now wondering, okay, I've got the what, but now the how do I do that? So that's what we'll be working on.
Yeah, I was like, when Sarah and I were putting this together, we're like, this is kind of depressing. We're just talking about the problem and then all the impact it has on children and their lives. But our next one is really, we want it to be rubber meets the road, practical strategies that can be implemented in the primarily educational setting, but some also in the home setting, to help resolve these issues of trauma so they don't have the negative lifelong impact on our students. So does anyone have any questions or anything that comes to mind?
I will just say quickly, I put the registration for next month's training in the chat so people can go register. And we also put the link for the handouts. It's a Google Drive. And so that is in there. And those, like Sarah said, along with the slides, will be posted on our webpage for reference as well. And I am going to launch the survey that we have via Zoom polls, just a couple of questions if you guys wouldn't mind providing us some feedback on the training, but please feel free to ask questions or type them in the chat if anybody has anything.
I have to ask Heidi, are you from Hastings originally?
I'm not. I get asked that a lot. My husband is from Geneva and his dad actually has no siblings. And so we are not related to the Hastings farmers.
There's big farmer families here in Hastings. So, and I'm pretty sure one of the daughters is named Heidi. So I was just checking.
Oh, really?
Well, thank you, everyone. It was good to see some faces that I've met before, but it's been a long time. I haven't seen Terry for a long time. I haven't seen Angie for a long time. And then meeting some new people. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. This is my favorite topic in the world to talk about. So if any of you ever have questions or just like something comes to mind, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to, but I hope you all can come next time. Really looking forward to that one.
I know we don't have any of it done yet.
Well,
we
thank
will.
you. Thank you both for sharing your expertise with us. We really appreciate it. And everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us, and get out and enjoy the beautiful evening.